I knew about the book and the author, Dr. Smilios, because another printing. I read the National Herald because of Hellenic, and thank you very much for that, for being here. And it was very, I was very attracted to it because to write this book, we'll talk about the writing process, of course, but the emphasis or in her journey to write the book, she did a lot of research, and which is part of what I do as a trained sociologist at Queen's College. And a lot of my students are here today, and thank you very much for being here. To realize the importance of research that belongs to the public domain is not a private issue. And also to oral histories, in making, conducting many oral histories, which is exactly what we do at the Hellenic American Project. Of course, I want to thank Brita, I don't know if Brita is here, and the society. And now we are here at the castle. I hope you all feel like queens and kings, because we are in the castle. Right? There is no dragon today. The dragons are away. I want to thank Angie for doing that, and of course Harry, and Mr. Dimitri, who is doing all the taping, and the Panagiotis, the assistant. To tell a story, to try to do that. The book clubs within the Greek American community is not an easy thing. And thank you very much for doing all this. And there are some loyal members of the Elder Care, the Greek Elder Care book club. My former students who are now teachers and other things, who are members also of the Historical Society. Thank you very much. So before any other, you want to hear the author, of course. Usually what we do is, I want to go direct to the book because it's a fascinating book, but usually people, they want to know more about you. Okay. You're a mystery woman, so people want to, they want to see you, to realize a few things. So we start the first part, the biographical background. You state your name, of course, and because you're going to use all this material for the archives on Greek American community. We host it at Queen's College. We have a physical space, we have a website, YouTube channels, and all the other things. And we disseminate the information. Thank you very much for your consent to participate into our research and being here today. So state your name and where you were born and grew up.
So my name is Maria Smilios, and I was born in New York. And I grew up in New York City and recently moved to North Carolina in 2020. Wasn't supposed to be living there now, but it kind of happened that way. We live in Asheville, North Carolina now.
North Carolina is a place with, historically, a Greek community also. Let's start first with your years here in New York, born and raised in New York. Which part of New York?
Oh, so my family moved around a lot. I was actually born at Boulevard Hospital, well, what used to be Boulevard Hospital, which is by Bryant High School.
Yeah.
It's not there anymore.
31st Avenue, I know that.
So my father's grandparents. So let me just. It's tangled. My mother's family came here in 1951 after the war. My grandmother from my mother's side did not like it here. Her husband got sick, he died of cancer, and she moved back to Greece. So my father's parents had settled in Astoria about the same time. So I kind of say I lived in Astoria because we lived with them for a long time.
Oh, this is great.
So, but we also lived in Jackson Heights. We also lived in Florida. We kind of bounced around a lot. Anyhow, so it was predominantly Astoria. So I went to the cathedral school when I was young, in 3rd grade. And then so I can honestly, I would just say I lived in Astoria. That's what I tell people. I lived in Astoria.
But you had grandparents being in America before the 50s?
So my father's father came here in 1927 from Paris. He was born in Constantinople, and he fled when the Ottoman Empire chased out the Greeks. He was sent to Paris, where he stayed for 17 years. And he came over here with his best friend, your daddy, right? And they came here, and he got a job in the fur market as a sweep. He was just like sweeping.
Yeah.
And so my grandmother was born, his wife was born here. My dad was born here. But, so my grandmother's from Castoria.
Yeah. So practically you're second plus or third generation Greek American. I mean,
No, it's a generation and a half.
yeah, because your grandpa came.
My whole mom's side of the family was born in Greece. So
Yeah.
only my grandfather from my dad's side
Yeah.
was born in Greece. My dad and his
Yeah.
mom were born
Yeah.
here, so I don't know, what is
Yeah.
it, a generation and a half?
So
Something like that.
You have part of the family, almost 100 years, a continuous presence in America. If he came in the late 1920s.
That's terrifying. I never thought of it like that, I guess. 1927 he came here.
Yeah. Look at this. Centennial, yeah.
Terrifying.
You're here, big roots here. And how was it? It is a typical immigrant situation, Greek at home, English outside home, two parallel things. How was it growing up in Astoria or Jackson
That was an
Heights?
interesting question. My mom was fluent in English. She loved English. She loved the English language. She's the one who turned me on to literature and poetry. She spoke fluent Greek. My grandmother from Greece had lived with us for a while. She spoke to me in Greek. I went to a Greek American school. The cathedral school was a bilingual school. You had 2 hours a day of Greek. And so I was fluent in Greek. And I could read it and write it. So she spoke to me in Greek. My mom spoke to me in English. My grandfather from my father's side spoke to me half Greek, half English. My grandmother spoke full English. So it was kind of a mishmash of language. And then my father's sister moved to Greece in her early 20s and lived there because she married a Greek. So then, it was like a mishmash of language, but I was fluent in Greek at one point. If I go back to Greece and I stay for a while, I can speak well. I mean, they still pick up the American accent. I always used to say, like, people never thought I was fully American, and they never thought I was fully Greek. I was caught in this, like, weird, like, bicultural, like, demented universe. Because I did spend a lot of time in Greece when I was younger. My grandmother, when she returned, my mom used to send me to her village, which was torture. But anyway, I spent a lot of time there. Anybody who's been sent to a village
in northern Greece.
So my grandmother's family is from Sparti, my mom's side, and they live in this village, Vasara, which is like 11 kilometers out. And so my friends were here roaming around having fun, and I was like stuck in this Greek village with my grandmother commanding me to do all sorts of tasks. But I was there for a long time, in the summer times, and so I really was entrenched in the culture in many, many ways.
So the family was somehow involved in the Greek American community, since you are part of the Greek American school, their events, their religious holidays.
My grandfather from my father's side, on his lapel, always wore a Greek American flag. He had the Greek flag on one side and the American flag on the other side. My mother's side, my grandmother did not like America. She did not have a good experience here. However, my mom in 1964 won Miss Greek Independence at the World's Fair. And so they were very involved in the Greek community, the Greek American community then.
Yeah.
When my grandmother went back, my mom not so much, but my grandparents on my father's side were very involved, like with the Historical Society and in that Greek American community.
Now that you visit Astoria or Greek American communities, do you see any difference from then to now?
That's such a loaded question. Yeah, I mean, Astoria has changed drastically from the Astoria that I grew up in. First of all, I was just saying outside, I lived in Astoria most of my life. Before we left for North Carolina, we were living in Astoria with my daughter. like 9 blocks from where I grew up. And I watched the neighborhood change. I watched it become extraordinarily gentrified. I watched them pull out the supermarkets and all those little markets and all the bread stores and everything that made it a little neighborhood and accessible to people who are older, because there are a lot of older people that live there. And I watched the bike lanes go in and the city bikes, and the kitchens in apartments increasingly get smaller and smaller. So you're forced to order out. And it's no longer that kind of small, homey neighborhood where everyone, I mean, I guess it's changed like this everywhere, but it's extraordinarily expensive to live there. I mean, I don't understand like, how people could live there right now. But I think a lot of that immigrant culture has been removed, that old world immigrant culture. And I mean, there's good things happening, things change, but at the same time, it's not the place that I grew up in, where there was like 6 bakeries within a 10-block radius, and my grandfather would only buy bread from that particular bakery, even though it was like 2 blocks farther. You know what I mean? Like it was habit, so.
I know that you got your graduate studies at a very prestigious university, Boston University. You lived in Boston, but also I want to go a little bit further back and talk about your CUNY years, because we're at Queens College here.
I love CUNY.
Tell us about your BA here experience. It was a Greek club there. You associated with
My
them?
brother was part of that. I wasn't. It was very strange. We met a lot of Greek Americans. So I went to Hunter College. There was a big Greek American community there. A lot at the time. There were a lot of students coming over from Greece. I think they're H-1 visas. Is that what it is? And
F1.
F1. I'm not exactly sure. You just kind of make friends. And I felt like in every other class, I was meeting Greek kids who were here from Greece. And we all became friends. And they started this very robust Greek club. And my brother went and hung out, and I ended up going to work with one of my best friends who I'd met at Hunter College. But he was very involved in that Greek American club, and they would just kind of hang out and play backgammon, and
Oh, look at this.
Yeah, it was
Play
fun.
Portes and all this.
That's the whole thing. Yeah.
Look at this. Interesting. But it was some kind of pressure from home, the parents to get involved with a Greek.
Not at all.
Not at all.
Not at all.
Okay.
My grandmother in Greece was like, she was just kind of very traditional Greek grandmother, but not from my father's side. They were easygoing. They were like, you don't have to kind of.
But at some point, the family and yourself, you thought about repatriating, going back to Greece and live there for
I
good?
love Greece. When I went there, I did live there. I lived there for 1 year, like 2 years, but on and off on different times. It wasn't 2 years straight. And I think the thing that, the reason I had come back is because you really couldn't find any work. Like, it was really hard to find work. And I don't drive. I never really have driven, so that was a problem for me too. It still is a problem in North Carolina, but that's a different story. And it was very hard to get around in Greece, if you didn't drive. Now the transportation is much better.
All right, so you have somebody else to drive you. This is nice. This is convenient.
Wow.
This is high life, I think.
That comes with a lot of grief.
At the same time, because the Greek background, being in Greece, of course, you had the prestigious positions while you were in Boston. You've done so many great things within the American society. How you identify yourself? As a Greek American, as an American?
Greek American. I that's really what I am, because it wasn't something. Even my daughter, who is now she was born here. She identifies as Greek American because I told her about the Greek culture. I had taken her to Greece twice, actually. No, two times. We had taken her, and we spent a long time there. We spent 8 weeks there. I had taken her to meet my grandmother, so she met her great-grandmother. And that is part of who she is. But I was really entrenched in the culture from a young age, like more so than she ever was, because she doesn't have anybody to talk to her in Greek. Like she doesn't have a grandmother to talk to her in Greek.
Yeah, but in this respect, what Greece means to you and what America means to you?
Oh God, how long do we have here? I don't know. That's a kind of interesting question. Well, not to wax political here, it's very hard to define what the United States means at this moment, because I think when my mother used to tell me stories when she came through what's now the Verrazano Narrows, where the bridge is, and when they saw, when they came through, she came through on a boat called the Nealas. It was a ship that used to come all the time from Greece, and she would tell me the story of coming up to the top of the ship. And all of those pictures you saw are true. If anybody came over, they would go to the top of the ship as soon as they came into the harbor and past the Narrows, and the Statue of Liberty started to come into view. And people were weeping and clapping, and it really was a place where you felt you could come for a better life. I talk a lot about that in the book. Immigrants who came here for this reason. Who were welcomed, who felt like when they came here, they could do anything. Greece, because I didn't grow up there, it always was like a kind of magical place in a way. And when I did live there, I was young and I went with my best friend. It was like right after my mom died and I just needed to get away. And we spent a year just kind of working in various restaurants and enjoying ourselves. We really were like whatever. We took a year off from school. And again, it was kind of like a playground. And then I was like, well, we really can't find any jobs here. And we probably should go back and finish school. So we collectively came back and finished school. But I always felt like because I was raised in story, that was another part. Like this book was easy for me to write. The story of the nurses is built on oral history. So over the 8 years that I worked on it, I built an archive of these women. My grandmother would always tell me stories about saints and martyrs and Greek myth. Like when she got mad at me, she would say, for those who in Greek, she would say ise skila, like Santi Skila, like she would allude to the Odyssey, right? Which was a mythic creature in the Odyssey, right?
Skila και Charybdis.
Yeah, so that's how she would get mad at me, my mother's mother. So it was always these poetic ways, and she would read to me Odysseus and Litis, and so I grew up with language, like Greek language, and it was beautiful to me. It was beautiful to be able to think in two languages. And sometimes when I try and explain something, I can only think of it in Greek, like an explanation of somebody who's maybe, I don't know, whatever, irritating me, or I want to say something, it comes to me in Greek. And that's what I meant by the demented kind of bicultural.
How the Greeks received you in Greece when they realized that you are also an American? And what happens here when the Americans realize that you have a Greek background?
The Greeks in Greek never think I'm Greece. If I get into a taxi, how many times they're like, we'll take her for a ride, in Greek, like if there's somebody in the car, and I'm like, why would you do that? And they're like, oh, you're one of us? And I'm like, yeah. So for some reason, they never think I'm actually Greek. Here, they just don't care. They're like, oh, that's pretty cool. Like, when I say I'm Greek American, they actually often mistake me for French. I don't know why. But nobody really ever, if they don't know my last name, thinks I'm actually Greek.
One of the subjects you have studied and also taught was around religion.
Yeah.
How about the Greek Orthodox religion or the church in America? Do you attend it? It was, you think it is something there that it is problematic to being an American and also with the Greek American religion?
That's another loaded question because my grandmother on my mother's side built 3 churches and she was basically a nun. She was extremely dogmatic and religious. I mean, it was all about God, it was all about religion all the time from the time I grew up. And there were the stories of the saints and the martyrs folded into that. And, I could tell you at the time when I was younger, what every saint did, how they did it, why they did it. And I grew up on these stories, and I did she would take us to church. And when I was in Greece, I got dragged to all of the churches, like the ones way up on the mountain. We went to monasteries, again and again. My mom was not religious like that, and my father's side of the family was not religious like that. They went on the holidays and they celebrated. I don't know, the Greek American Church here, I went to Cathedral, that was also, we went to church there, so there was, we had religion there. I don't really follow the church, I don't know how progressive it is or not progressive it is right now, so it'd be hard for me to make a statement about the church itself. But for me, it was, kind of so hammered into me that I was like, I can't do this anymore. This is kind of nuts. It became overwhelming, to hear those stories again and again and again.
Now that we are in the middle or the beginnings, I don't know, of the new technological revolution, and you have social media and all this, and you have friends and maybe some members in Greece, you communicate, you use social media to communicate with your relatives in Greece and friends?
Sometimes. So my aunt, who's in Greece, will sometimes go through a Facebook, but not really. They basically still call. It's still I'm going to call you up now. They don't do WhatsApp or anything like that. And yeah, we don't really go back and forth on social media that much.
Do you watch any Greek shows or Greek TV, Greek newspapers, or Greek American?
Oh God, I can't read a Greek newspaper for my life. It's interesting.
But the Greek American media? Some of them?
I don't catch it. That's part of the thing. But sometimes, if I'm in Greece, I watch those comedy shows. I think they're really funny. The thing is, because my ear isn't used to it, they talk so fast that I can't pick it up. But I don't, yeah.
Coming to the concluding remarks of this part, and then we go deeper to your book. How do you see the future of Hellenism? You have your family, a history of 100 years in America. And now we realize from the census and other quantitative data that the American-born Greeks are numerically more than the immigrant generation. So that leads to, at least, to dramatic changes, this transition that we have now. So we need to rebuild or to imagine new institutions, new things. Do you think that it will be a continuity
I hope so.
for the Greek American community?
I hope that the experiences of people like me and the generations after, or even new immigrants that come over here, is preserved, because I think it's important. Immigration in America is a fascinating topic, as you know, right? And Greeks were a really prominent part of that immigration, and I hope that people here, I always tell my students, I teach a class at Columbia University, or when I talk, just sit down with people and talk to them. I kind of regret that, before my grandfather died, we didn't have iPhones. I wish I would have just taken a tape recorder and put it on the table and let him talk. Because you always think I'm going to remember this, and you don't. And the stories that they tell are fascinating. And then you realize as you get older, how much they weave themselves into your psyche. There's a reason that they keep telling you the same thing. And even though at the time when you're young, it's irritating, there's a reason for it. And I hope that, you've done an amazing job helping to preserve that culture. And I hope that younger people also realize that it is worth preserving, and the stories in Greece are worth telling. Because the richness of it doesn't just go back to the days of Socrates and Plato and, the ancients that everyone knows. There's really beautiful things coming out of Greece. I just don't know if they're fully reaching people here. I don't. That was one of the things when my mom won Miss Greek Independence that she talked about. There was this, even though the technology was less, there was a much more closer ability to relay information, and maybe it's because people actually talk to each other rather than just scrolls now. So I don't know, I feel like there's a big giant disconnect with what is happening in Greece and what's happening here in the two communities. That just could be me.
Yeah. Excellent, thank you very much for that.
Yeah.
That's about some of the narratives and themes that we see in your very, very interesting book. What drew you initially to the story of the Black Angels and the Sea View Hospital?
So I found this story, it was a kind of accident. I was editing a book. I was an editor for biomedical sciences, and I was editing a book on orphan lung disease, which is diseases that affect 1 in like 1 million people. And it was August of 2015, and it was one of those like horribly hot New York days. And the air conditioner, I was just like kind of over what I was doing. And I had to finish this, and I always have had a fascination with disease and how it moved through New York City. And so I read this line, and it was from a doctor in this chapter, and he was going to test a new medication, and he said, I hope that it's as swift as the cure for tuberculosis was at Seaview Hospital in Staten Island. And I was like, what is he talking about? And so I Googled it, and this article came up about the cure in Staten Island and this hospital, and I was like, wow, how do I not know about this? But then tucked alongside of it was another article about this cadre of Black nurses called the Black Angels. I'm like, well, who are these women, right? And so I tried to Google them, and nothing came up. And then, you know when you get obsessed with something and you're like, I am determined to find out what this is, even if it leads to nothing. Well, that's what kind of happened to me. And then 3 days later, after falling down this rabbit hole, I don't know why, I just picked up the phone and called the Staten Island Museum. And this woman answered, and in the article there was the name Virginia Allen, this nurse that's still alive was mentioned. And I said to them, have you heard of this woman named Virginia Allen? And the woman on the phone who picked up the phone paused, and with indignation, she was like, well, you haven't? I was like, oh, no, but I'd like to. And so she's like, she's giving this, we're having a grand reopening, and she's giving a little talk on the Black Angels this weekend. So off I went with my then 4-year-old and went to Staten Island for the 3rd time in my life. And I met her, and we started talking, and we met every Wednesday for, now let me preface this. The story had been circulating in Staten Island for a number of years. It was very sanitized. It was basically white nurses quit, Black nurses were called up, and the cure was found, and yay, right? And I'm like, not really. And so the more I'd start to dig into the story, it started to become this extraordinary story, not just about these nurses, but about the people who were treated at Seaview Hospital, who were mainly immigrants, who lived on the Lower East Side. At the time, there were 80,000 5-story buildings that collectively housed 2.3 million people, immigrants, and that was 2/3 of New York City at the time. Most of those, they were sent to Seaview. The city hated them. They called them fever breeding structures. They looked at immigrants as I write in the book, quote, uncouth, un-American, immoral consumptives that were sent to this hospital high up on a hill to languish and die. And that struck me because I thought, can you imagine coming all the way from somewhere in Europe and what you find is like sickness, stigma, and Seaview Hospital? Like,
I remember sometimes I teach Susan Sontag, and she wrote many things. Among them is about diseases. The disease is another ethnicity, so it is. But so you don't talk only about the medicine in 20th century in America, but you in your book I find that you redefine our understanding of race, of segregation, and all this.
So the people that were sent to Seaview, this was obviously in the pre-antibiotic days. There was no, I mean, you came down with the strep infection and you could die. So they were sent to this hospital to languish and die. There were a lot of Greeks that went to this hospital. They were stigmatized. Tuberculosis was one of the most stigmatizing sicknesses around. Seaview Hospital was high up on a hill. It's the highest point between Maine and Virginia. It was extremely difficult to get there. You had to take, well, if you lived on the Lower East Side, you would jump on the ferry and then get on a bus. But a lot of the people didn't like to go and visit the people who were there, because when they came back to their communities, they were shunned because the communities were afraid that they were going to get tuberculosis. And so I remember when I went there for the first time, the woman, Virginia Allen, lives in the restored nurses' residence of Seaview. So you can get, which is right across the street from, it's 500 yards from the abandoned buildings where the patients used to be. So you can get a kind of view of Manhattan. And back then, the trees weren't there. So the patients were able to see the city. And I started thinking, this is before the story became like the idea for a book came. I was just kind of exploring, is there enough here? Can you imagine what it must feel like to be sent to this place, be perceived as the sum of your sickness, and then look at the city that's just 5 miles across the harbor and not be able to get there? And that's when I was like, this is a story about people who were, and we still do this with people who are sick today, turn somebody into the sum of their illness. Yeah. And it kind of, the book went through 3 different iterations, and the final version of it happened one day during COVID, where we were a mile from Elmhurst Hospital, and I remember seeing the nurses there in garbage bags, and it was so horrifying to me. And we went for a walk one day with my daughter, and we would walk miles every day because we didn't have anything else to do. And we ended up at Elmhurst Hospital, and I remember seeing a line of sick people sneaking around the corner. And I had stopped writing at the time, and I was like, oh my goodness, this book is about, nothing has changed in 100 years. This is really about who lives and who dies based on the zip code in which you live. And that was the wellspring for what became the book. So it is
class
really
and
about
race and gender.
Yeah, all those like social determinants of health.
In the book, we see the nurses' experiences, but they unfold along-wise with the search for the TB cure. But how do you manage, how you balance their emotional resilience with the scientific narrative? Because you also have the scientific facts at the same time.
Yeah.
How you balance that, the emotional part and also the scientific part?
So I love storytelling, and I love folding science into story. And my dad didn't go to college, and I had a professor. He was a Dante professor when I was in graduate school, and his father had also not gone to college. My dad barely graduated high school, but he was the best storyteller ever. And I remember my professor, I said to him, I'm just not an academic writer. I just like to write like papers, like story. And he said, always write so your dad would understand it. And so when I wrote this book, I was thinking about like an audience that, anybody could pick this up and understand the science. And so it wasn't that hard to do, because I knew if I folded the science into the emotional component of the book, that it would just flow out like a story. It would be like if I was sitting down and telling you, hey, so-and-so is, I don't know, whatever, has a staph infection, and the doctor said that they're gonna need to do this, this, and this. I'm not gonna use the scientific terms with just a general person who I'm talking to. And so that's how it became easier to balance.
So is this one of the moments, or there are other moments or story within the book most deeply affected you as a writer or researcher? Finding your own voice. Do you hear your voice in this book?
It's, yes and no. Like when you said read a passage, and I said I haven't actually looked at a passage in this book in over 2.5 years, actually more, since I had sent it to the publisher the final time.
And the book took you how many years to write it?
8.
8 years.
8 years. But I guess, when I read it, I'm like, sometimes I'm like, I don't even remember writing that. But yes, I kind of hear it. I'm working on a second book now, and now that I'm back into like the groove of writing, and I have to say, like, there's the research components of it, and then for me, I don't do well with bad drafts. Like what I should do is just put stuff on paper and leave it and come back to it. But I always think, oh my God, what if I put it down, then I can't write ever again, right? And so I toil with it, which is a bad thing to do. But once I start to get into it, then I'm like, oh yeah, this is my voice. I get it now. Like I'm back in it. Or I say, if I read it out loud, I'm like, oh, this is cringe. Like I would, no.
But the book is very radical because we see that the Black Angels, they challenge, and now we expand the historical narratives that existed so far. So how that happened? How is this? What is the contribution, your contribution as a writer, as a researcher, doing that?
So I thought here's a little aside. When I was in graduate school, I had the wonderful opportunity to study with Dr. Elie Wiesel, Auschwitz survivor. I took his class, and he walked in on the first day. It was a graduate seminar, and he rolled up his sleeve, and he showed us his number. And he said, now you have seen this. You will never be able to turn away from it. You will never be able to unsee it. And the whole class was built on this idea of bearing witness. And what do you do, and how as a human being, it's your moral responsibility that if you bear witness to an injustice, that you need to do something. Yeah. And he was always very clear, and it doesn't have to be something as monumental as the Holocaust. It could simply be that somebody slammed a door in somebody's face. And what are you going to do about that? And obviously he had told us, you never want to put yourself in a position where you're going to get yourself hurt. But if you have the opportunity, and that class changed the way I wanted to use my voice. And so this is a story that is so deeply embedded in injustices. Injustice to the people that were sick, injustice to the women who were sent to care for them. Just a little bit of background. The reason these nurses were called up, in 1929, the white nurses, the hospital predominantly hired white nurses, quit. And the reason they quit was because they had opportunities for jobs that wouldn't kill them. And they started leaving this hospital. And so the city was in this kind of situation where they had two choices, either close the wards and let hundreds of these patients, at the time it was almost 1,000, converge on the city and bring the TB numbers up. And the Commissioner of Health was like, that is not gonna happen, not on my watch. And so they got this idea to call up Black nurses from the South, because at the time, Black nurses were only allowed to work in Black hospitals. And there were only 260 Black hospitals in America versus the 6,000 white ones, which were continuously understaffed. But they didn't want to hire them. In New York, believe it or not, there were 29 municipal hospitals. Only 4 allowed Black nurses to work. Seaview was one of them. So the city said, we'll issue a hiring call, and we'll give them incentives. We'll promise them good pay, housing, and a professional career. And so the families of a lot of these women told me, the idea to have a professional career as a Black woman was so appealing because they felt, well, I could become part of the American middle class. And if I become part of the American middle class, then we can collapse Jim Crowism and segregation. And so they put out a call, down, it went across the Mason-Dixon line and deep into the American South, and these women started coming when they heard about a job in New York City, but they didn't realize that it was Staten Island. They thought they were coming to New York, to Harlem. And so that's how these women began working. That's just an important part of the story, the background of it. And so the injustice that was done to them was also harrowing to me. I didn't know that. I grew up in New York City. This was supposed to be where people migrated here. And when you start to really peel back the layers of history in New York City, there's a lot of Jim Crowism that happened here. The myth of the Harlem Renaissance, when I really started to dig into it, I think it was Langston Hughes that said, I'm going to paraphrase now, something like, no black person can pay rent from these clubs. You know, they were not invited to be in the clubs.
Yeah.
They were entertainment
Yes.
for white folks who came up.
Or go in from the back door.
And then this was also against the backdrop of the Great Depression. So we have to layer that in, and some of the highest unemployment was in Harlem at the time. So it was all of these like layers of history that were shocking. I was like, wait a second, New York, really?
And also, since you mentioned now the Renaissance, Maya Angelou and others, and also it's a whole great blues music about TB, right? And you know, it's a whole culture about.
Oh, there was like TB chic in the Victorian age, where the girls, a lot of the romantic poets had tuberculosis. Like Keats died of TB, and you know he was this
Samson.
This golden boy, and all these women would swoon, so they decided that they were going to starve themselves and have that like wan, you know, sick expression, and they called it TB chic. As a consumption, really, you know, it's well, it's crazy.
One problem that I have as a researcher, not only me, other people who want to study Greek Americans, there's not easy to get records, archives, etc. For example, the Greeks who came from Asia Minor, they came, some of them with not a Greek passport, so they were registered here as something else. Or the Greeks from Egypt, they came with different passport. Or the Greeks from the Dodecanese, before the unification, they came with Italian passport. So it's very difficult to find the records to see how many Greeks came exactly. So difficulty with archives. How tell us about this process? How difficult, how easy it was for you to go deep, because you went deep to the vaults, to basements, to find things.
That was a whole other. I look back on it, I don't even understand. Like, if it had become such a labor of love at one point that I was determined to finish it. Seaview Hospital has no archives. Their archives were turned to pulp. There's a whole floor of this hospital with like 3 foot deep patient records and HR records. So those were out. The only thing they have are intake cards. The census was great to look at the census because it did give some information, but when you're researching, you'll see names are often spelled wrong, people change their names, they give different birthdays, so you really have to be tenacious in what you do in terms of digging into those archives. The fortunate thing that I had was the doctor who was in charge of the trials, his son was alive. He gave me his father's archives. In those archives, he had the original patient list for the isoniazid trials, which was the first drug that cured tuberculosis, and 2 of those people were alive. I cold called a bunch of them, and 2 of them were alive, and I got to talk to them, and they were able to give me a lot of information. The nurse's story was built on all oral history. Like, I traveled with one of the family members to South Carolina and then to Savannah, Georgia, and you just follow one thread after another, and
so
newspapers.
The oral testimonies, they play a role to change your mind or perception of the medical records, or there was some kind of verifying or contradictory?
So that's an interesting question, because the 2 patients that I found, one was from Puerto Rico and one was an African American woman. Both of them were completely stigmatized from their community. Their experience was harrowing, and I basically, in the book, I tell exactly how it was told to me. I just cleaned up the interview. So their experience of tuberculosis was like worse than I had read about, to hear it like from them. How these fever dreams when they were dying, and how the nurses, what they remember are, one woman said they believed Seaview was haunted. And I've heard this multiple times. One woman said, I would wake up and I would see these figures they were very religious. Like the Virgin Mary standing over my bed telling me, come now, come now. And so you really heard these stories of like what it meant to be sick for such a long period of time. The average stay at Seaview was 2 years straight.
That's a dramatic story. Let's talk about a little bit more about oral history, because we love what we do, and we do what we love with oral histories. In what ways do you think that oral history as a method helps to preserve marginalized voices in history?
Well, you hear the story firsthand. It's a firsthand experience, right? And when I wrote the book, Virginia Allen, who's still alive, I talked to my editors and we were like, okay, this is what we're gonna do. This is her experience, this is her memory. Was 86 at the time, she's 94 now. Memory fades, memory changes, right? I was like, if she thinks she was hired at 16 years old to work in the pediatric ward at Seaview with no nursing experience because there was a dire nurse shortage after World War II, and they needed bodies is really what it was. And so she remembers it as like, oh, it was great. Like, I got to play with the kids, and yes, they were sick. But when you look, I happened to find a record book with the nurses from that time. That tells a completely different story. Like the story of the patient. So for example, it was like George covered in lesions, Ruth, listless, Johnny partially paralyzed, right? And I said, I'm gonna preserve Virginia's experience because it was lived and it's hers, but I'm gonna fold in. And I made it a point to say, Virginia found joy in doing this job. However, in the nurse's log, this is what was told. And so you have to, if you're writing like this kind of a book, you always have to keep in mind that what somebody is telling you is their lived experience, and it's not necessarily 100% fact. But I think the beauty in oral history is all of the lived experiences. Like if you have ever gone and listened to like stories of the Holocaust, those firsthand experiences, they're harrowing, but they're moving because
No, what you described is very important because the book, the style, the process is very interesting to me because on one hand, the book reads this journalistic precision. You are very precise with certain things, and at the same time, it has this literally sensitivity. The author is very sensitive. I keep that and I bring the other. This is for me very, very important. But how do you integrate the factual parts and also the narratives as a writer?
I tend to. I always wanted to be a poet, but I just didn't have the discipline, and I don't have that kind of language command. So I have the ability to write something longer, to make a sentence and something longer. So you can fold in fact really beautifully if you have enough narrative to fold it into. So if I want to talk about, if the fact is that it's cold outside, it was raining the night that the person was run over by a truck, right? Like you can report it like a newspaper, here on the corner at 9 o'clock. Or you can say, something like, it was Johnny's last day of school when he decided to go out for a walk late at night. He had his dog with him. It was 9:30. Mr. J, who was driving the truck down Bell Boulevard, didn't see. You know what I mean? So then you can turn those facts into a story if you have enough, as I say, the senses, you want the person to be with you. Like I look at writing as if I'm gonna take you for a ride. You're gonna be here, and I'm going to, as I tell my students, when you are writing, you have, and I don't drive, but I know what it's like to be in a car with a good driver, right? And you're driving down the road and they pull over and they get back on the highway. I don't want somebody to pull over and make me fall out one way and then get on the highway and go cross 6 lanes. I want a smooth ride. So it's the same thing with writing. you want somebody to be sitting right here, like, you know those images of little kids like looking over their parents' shoulders? That's how I think of like my readers. I want them to be right here. I want them to be in the moment. I want to take them from Savannah, Georgia, to Harlem, to this hospital ward, and I want them to stay with me. And how are they going to stay with me? If they can smell things, if they can see things, if they can feel the character.
Yeah.
You know, people don't just want facts. If they want facts, they can read a Reuters report, you know?
Yeah.
So I think good journalism, that's why it's narrative. It tells a story.
Since we both dealing with students, and I keep telling to my students, don't give me your first draft when you give me your papers. I remember John McAfee's book, draft number 4, which means you write, you rewrite, and after 2 or 3 rewritings, you sit down and you write. It is how you do it? You have many drafts?
Oh God, I have 75,000 words on the computer that got cut out. I mean, this went through an immense amount of like drafting and editing. I think I went back and forth with my editor like 3 or 4 times. Then there's a copy editor who, like, bless them, picks up like these weird tics in your writing.
Yeah, because it has to be a decision. What do you leave out and what do you keep, right? And
yeah, so for me, I like to keep a narrative tight. I don't like, even though it might be cool, if it doesn't progress the story, it's not going to go in there. Like some of the stuff I cut out was like, we call it like killing your darlings, was really painful for me because it was kind of fun stuff, but it did nothing to move the narrative forward. And if the narrative doesn't move, people put the story down. So I don't mind cutting things out. I like it much tighter.
Yeah. How much empathy play a role in writing the book? Your empathy, your sympathy, your support in your interpretation, portraying the Black Angels.
I'm a naturally like overly empathetic like person. I can cry over a tire commercial. So when I was interviewing these people and I heard these stories and what these women lived through, I always, you know, I don't cry in front of the people because I feel like it takes away from their moment and it makes them uncomfortable. But I would go home and I wouldn't be able to transcribe it for a long time. Like it took me a long time to sometimes return to these interviews. Like one of the women in the book, Missoria, her niece told me these stories about her living in this hard-line Jim Crow town in deep in the state of South Carolina. And she would get up in the morning and pick cotton, and we walked through the forest the way she walked when I went down there because they couldn't go the direct route because the white people who worked in Milltown would throw bottles at them and want to hurt. And she was like 11 years old, and this was before school. So, you know, it was, and then the stories of these patients. And so I wanted people to be compassionate, but I also didn't want it to be sappily sentimental. Like, I can't deal with that. Like, it's, you know, these overly sentimental things. I just wanted it to hit a note where people would be like, I feel this person.
How can we, as readers, you know, make this connection of Black Angels to present-day health-related issues and services? I mean, the Greek Elder Care does a fabulous job, and I realize how important is what they do when I see what they do to support people. But how do you envision that the readers, you know, issues like public health, race, caregiving?
So the Black Angels, as I say, had a 1 in a million moment. You know, people don't have a 1 in a million moment every day. In 1933, the nurses, the president of hospitals held this meeting in Lower Manhattan. There were 300 people there. There was a bunch of Black nurses that showed up. And one young Black nurse stood up and said, Mr. President, why do you keep sending Black nurses to Seaview? And he said, well, quote, the reason we do this is because in 20 years we won't have a colored problem in America because they'll all be dead from tuberculosis. Thing is, they didn't die, right? Despite all these impediments, they ended up being on the front lines of one of the most galvanizing moments in human history, the cure for tuberculosis. And that is why it's a 1 in a million moment, right? I think the people who worked the front lines of COVID were also part of this like historic 1 in a million moment. And so for me, when I think about these women, we don't have these 1 in a million moments, and they didn't come up here to do that. They just wanted to work, and every single family member said to me, they just did their job. They did nothing special, they went to work and did their job. That was it. And the thing was, they also were fighting for equity, not just as women, as Black women. They were maligned within the hospital system, but also for their patients. And one of the things they did was they had patience, they had their eye on the long game. And if we could learn anything from them in this world of like clicks and likes and immediate gratification, is to have patience. And nothing in healthcare can happen if people don't band together and say everybody deserves good healthcare. There's no reason that somebody should have cancer and go to a hospital that is hanging on by a thread when we have hospitals like Memorial Sloan Kettering. The disparity just within New York City. So I think networks that can help people find this care. And these women, in their eyes, they worked with one of the most deadliest diseases in human history, really during one of the most dreadful times in human history, during the Jim Crow years. They believed everyone deserved excellent care. And they gave it to them. And that's why they're called the Black Angels, because their patients would write them cards and say, you were my Black angel. That's how that name came about. So I think we can just, if we look to them, we can look towards these people who can teach us what it means to be truly empathetic and to truly look at people who, you're not the sum of your sickness. You are a human being. And that's what a lot of the two patients told me, that it was the first time when they encountered those nurses that they got their dignity back, because they didn't look at them as like a walking microbe.
Yeah. Well, the book is a great success. Normal people like us read it, we accept it, we love it. What is the reaction by medical institutions or academic or community official?
It's been good. I mean, I've spoken at probably over 200 schools. A lot of them have been schools of public health.
Besides schools, the medical community.
So it's funny because it's like two communities. It's like the nursing schools, and then there's the TB world. And the TB world has been extraordinary. I'm doing this huge conference in Copenhagen next month. It's the International Union on Tuberculosis, and I'm part of an author panel there that I'll be talking about the book. But they have loved it. And I'm so happy because there was this whole narrative crafted without these women. And when the book first came out, the TB, all the different TB organizations would send these little notes out on social media, on Valentine's Day, our Valentine are the Black Angels kind of thing. It was very sweet, but it's been good. The medical community is it is part of medical history. It wasn't, the doctor said it. His son told me, my father always used to say, if it wasn't for these Black nurses, none of this would have happened. He wasn't the one charting the records. He wasn't the one on the front lines giving the medication. He was just telling them this, how much you give out.
So it's a book that makes people change their mind.
I hope.
About history, storytelling.
Yeah, I hope.
Right. And you see, this is your responsibility as an author also to contribute, to make us...
I think if you're going to write a book on narrative non-history, you want people you want it to be impactful. You want people to think about something. And I did want people to think about something. And now, I never envisioned I would be writing a book like this during a pandemic when almost the same thing was happening. Or that we would see the same kind of health inequities that these women faced almost 100 years ago. But here we are, if Ine could teach something, I hope that people take away that, people who are sick don't want to be sick. I see these, it's kind of like we lived through that Hurricane Helene, and I would read these posts why didn't people evacuate? And it's you know, people didn't evacuate because they weren't told to evacuate, but you know, you see, and then they're like, oh, they just want to do this because they're waiting in their house, like, you know, taking videos of the water coming in for, you know, to go viral. And I'm like, yeah, really, people woke up this morning and they thought, I'm going to drown in my living room and I'm going to film it, you know? Like, this idea that we have that people want to be sick, people want to, like, be hurt is so bizarre to me. It really is, like, so strange. But I hope people take away that, no, nobody really wants to be sick. Yeah. Anyway.
Two last questions before your reading. First is your advice to new writers who want to base their books on research or histories archives, and the other is about the future projects.
Okay, so advice to new writers. Please do not use ChatGPT to do creative projects. Please do not use it for your research because it's wrong. It's like wrong, down the block wrong. Like I can tell instantaneously. It's a similar voice. My book has been fed into it, so I helped build it in some way. You have a creative voice. Find your own voice. Like, toil with it, struggle with it. Like, find the right words, but please do not rely on these tools that make it really easy. You know, yeah, sure, put in ChatGPT, write me an email to my landlord telling him X, Y, and Z. You know, that's fine. But I'm seeing more and more students using it for, like, creative projects, and it's just kind of like, why bother to call yourself a creative if you're feeding it into a machine? So, you know, you can't write well if you don't read. So, I mean, I have a 14-year-old. I'm not just saying this as like some curmudgeonous like teacher. I see what's going on here. You know, it's really hard you read an article online and then suddenly you're in some outer space. You started off reading an article about flooring and the next thing you're in Mars because you've been clicked 17 times. So I always say to my students, like, use your own brain, like use your own creativity, find your own voice. And if you want to do research and you are going to use ChatGPT, double check it somehow because it's going to be wrong. I just caught somebody telling me the most egregious thing, and I was like, this person didn't even read it over. Like, I guess if you're going to cheat, at least cheat well. Like, read it over, like, seriously. But don't use ChatGPT and just trust in your voice and trust in the process. Yeah. Like, really, it is a process. It's not going to come out like Athena fully formed from your head. Yeah. It really is not.
Yeah. And what is next for you?
So my next book, we just sold a proposal. It's going to be a book on the hurricane in Western North Carolina. It tells the story. It follows 3 families. And an amazing thing had happened. When the hurricane happened, I don't know if anybody was familiar with what happened. Western North Carolina got shut off from the world for like almost a week. There was literally no electricity, no internet, no water, nothing. No information coming in, no information being able to go out. There was a radio host who stayed on air for 14 days. And he was able to they got Starlinks, which are the global satellites, and they had generators. And what started to happen was the police, the first responders, would call the radio host and say, can you tell people we need chainsaws? Can you see if anybody knows the person on, 23 Beatree Lane? Amazing. And so he started doing this in real time, and then it became this crowdsourcing thing where then people would go to where the Starlinks were, which were very specific spots, and call him and say, hey, my grandmother lives in this area, she doesn't have oxygen, and people would start showing up. So the story revolves around him and these 3 families, and it's really at its heart like what can happen when people use their voice for good. And so, yeah, it will be published in September of 2027.
And you promise that you're going to come back for another
I promise I will come back.
Presentation of the book. So we have witnesses. Let's read something first.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, if we're happy to.
We need to do a reading first. We're going to document her own voice.
Oh. I'll just read the last passage so people can have time for
Great,
questions.
yeah.
So, as I said, I haven't read this in a long time.
Well, it's one of my favorites, as I told you.
So do you want me to read the very last section or the first part of the last section?
Yeah,
So this comes from the epilogue.
the beginning, which is very poetic.
This one?
Yeah, yeah. And the end.
So this is from the epilogue. I'll read this. I'll read the first paragraph. At night, the sky above Seaview is coal black, and the pavilions no longer lit are indistinguishable from the landscape. Inside the buildings, the wards have decayed, and in recent years, workers removed most of the beds and wheelchairs, desks and bookshelves, and medical equipment. They swept shelves, tossing trays and medicine and bandage into large bins. Whatever missed the containers or fell to the side remained on the floor, creating mismatched piles, remnants of a bygone time. In the basement, they overturned filing cabinets, spilling tens of thousands of medical records onto the floor. From end to end, the folder sprawled knee-deep, one life heaped upon another. Rain fell and seeped in and turned the pages to pulp. Today, the buildings continue to deteriorate. Whatever windows remain dangle from their frames, and entire floors have collapsed. Now, sometimes at night, Virginia hears the patrol dogs barking and the voices of urban explorers and curious teens scouring the abandoned buildings and acres of woods for stories of ghosts and witches and child killers with names like Crosby and the Gray Man, maybe the Bone Man too. And then
in the last paragraph.
So
this is very
Professor
important.
Alexiou wants me to read this last little section
it's very
here.
strong, yeah.
This last section ends on one of the nurses. And just for a little bit of context, she came here in 1936, and she lived in Staten Island her entire life. And so this takes place I'll tell you the date, okay. Everything was so fast now. There were cordless phones and computers and Xerox machines that made carbon copies obsolete. Cameras were disposable, and every day transatlantic flights flew thousands of people to Europe. On television, there was a 24-hour music channel, and doctors could now implant an artificial heart, although not for Miss McKinney or Mr. Cofino. There was also integration for Missouri's people. When she returned to Clinton, South Carolina to care for her mother, there were no more plaques announcing coloreds only, no Negroes, and white section. The signs had been taken down, but their square imprints on the walls and entrances remained. She hoped that in these ensuing years, those too would fade away, but for now she was happy. When Mr. Cofino died in 1988, she wept, her family said, mourning him as if he had never wronged her. For Missouri, Lavinia Meadows Walker, the world was never a bad place, just one that needed fixing. And on March 23, 2007, before she died, she cried out to her God and then closed her eyes, knowing that she and Edna and Miss Demby and Miss Evans, Clemmy, Miss Gillespie, Janie, Virginia, Kerline Jennings, Marjorie Tucker Reed, and all the other Black angels had been part of something profound, something that made the world better. As for herself, she had initiated and seen justice as much as one human being could hope to see.
Oh my God. Bravo.
Thank you. I guess if anybody has questions or comments.
How come the nurses didn't get sick?
They did. Some of them did get sick. They all had latent tuberculosis. We don't know how many of them actually died from TB because all those records are in that heaping pile of pulp. But they did. Some of them did come down with TB, but all of them tested positive within 6 months.
So those people, they were all immigrants, so they came in here, they were sick already?
No, so the immigrants that came in, most of them were immigrants, I would say. There was a lot of African Americans from Harlem also. But Seaview didn't really turn anyone away. The majority of them were immigrants. A lot of them either came with latent tuberculosis that was then spurred on by something, usually a weakened immune system, or caught it because they were living in these small 300 square foot apartments, like 10 to 12 people at a time, with no ventilation.
Because the people that came in through Ellis Island, they got checked, they were returned to their countries if they had TB.
Right, but there was a whole black market for x-rays.
It was called consumption.
Yeah, so a lot of people came in with different with x-rays of different people sometimes. But most of the people caught it when they were here. So, yeah.
I have a cousin that lives in Staten Island.
Oh, wow.
And I was last year, I just happened to go to the Staten Island Museum.
Oh, yeah, they have an exhibit.
There was a whole exhibit about the Black angels. And they sold your book, and so I bought the book there.
Oh, great, yeah.
And then I went to see the Seaview, I guess the dilapidated buildings.
Yeah, the buildings.
The buildings, and I saw where the nurses live. I just want to say I loved reading your book.
Oh, thank you.
It was fascinating. It was
Thank you.
very well done, very well written, and very easy to follow, as you said, very easy to understand. And it was also very warm.
Thank you so
very
much.
Sensitive.
Oh, good.
So I recommend it very highly.
The empathy,
Thank you.
the empathy.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is a little personal here. I'm holding the death certificate of my aunt, my father's sister, who died in 1941 at Seaview Hospital.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, my God.
And it says something bright, Sebra. What is the area?
Brielle Avenue.
It gives the address.
It's 1419 Brielle Avenue.
Please forgive me, everyone. I just the connection. When I saw this at the Greek Elder Center, it has an address here, Brighton.
Oh, yeah, Brighton, that's what it is. That's where they live. That's an area down in the
Is that
beginning.
part of the complex?
No, that's when you get off of the ferry. That area is called Brighton. This is incredible.
I'm Greek American. I just wanted to know, it says my aunt died, she was a machine operator in a fur factory. Is there a connection between fur and the disease tuberculosis?
So all the factories in New York, like all those factories had rampant tuberculosis because they were closed up, they were hot. They had, I know this from my dad, like they had those drums where the fur went through, like that, all that heat, laundromats, those big laundromats, industrial complexes. No, wow, this is
Yeah, the conditions.
I see.
machine operator. It's pretty awesome.
There's a social security number for her. Is there some way I can find out more records or anything about her? Can I write to your website, to your
Yeah,
email?
absolutely.
So I don't want to take up any time.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Yeah, absolutely. Send me a picture of that.
I will, thank you.
I'll see if I can, the people at Seaview are not very nice, they're gatekeepers. I'm just being honest. I can write to them, and if they're feeling benevolent, they might go into the place where they have the records there.
My father never talked
Yeah.
about her. And I understand when you said the stigma.
Yes.
Yeah.
Never said a word. And the grandmother my grandmother was just heartbroken. She died at 22 years old. She was there for a year. She
My
lived in
God.
the hospital for a year.
Yeah. Send me that, yeah. I'll give you my email after.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Maria. Thank
Hi.
you for the
You're
opportunity.
welcome.
I'm here on behalf of my sister. She's a professor at Felician Nursing School over in Jersey. And she really wanted to be here tonight. I said I'll come over and she had one question. We both just finished reading a book by Antonia Hilton called Madness.
Yeah, I know that one.
And again, the story was incredible. It was part of history that I had no idea about, although I worked in pharmaceuticals for Pfizer for years. And I've been in and out of hospitals all up and down the East Coast. So my question is, was there any similarity in their story, the angel story, and the nurses that had to deal with COVID?
Yes. I mean, there is, like, just on the most basic premise, both of them were dealing with an incurable illness. Both of them were at a time when, tuberculosis was a frustrating disease because the microbe is encased in 3 layers of fat, and it's very hard for antibiotics to penetrate it, and so they would try everything under the sun, like literally, to try and cure the disease, and antibiotics didn't work. It was the same thing with COVID, the frustration to try and find something, and even now, there's nothing that cures COVID, right? People still get it. We say the cure for tuberculosis, but the cure for tuberculosis means that you can get well from it. The treatment for it, people have told me it's akin to cancer, and It's like 12 pills 2 times a day. You have to be watched by the health department. You have to upload you taking them because they're afraid if you stop, then what happens is you get multi-resistant tuberculosis. And then also, at least in New York City, the nurses that were put on the front lines were predominantly nurses that were Black and Filipino. So that was a similarity. That seemed to be in the major cities. At North Carolina, when I went down there, was a little different because they don't have it's a predominantly white area. But yeah, I mean, even the way the patients were treated, and there were so many similarities between COVID and tuberculosis. And the stigma also related to COVID.
Oh, yes, yes.
The nurses were treated that took care of COVID patients.
Yeah, well, I mean, they were wearing garbage bags at Elmhurst Hospital.
They refused to get the vaccine, they got fired.
Well, I mean, there was no COVID, I mean, that's a whole other, for a different day. Yeah. Yeah.
Tuberculosis is on the rise, isn't it?
It is on the
Yes.
rise.
Really a lot, yeah.
It is on the rise. It is,
Worldwide,
I'm sorry?
yeah.
Worldwide, you said you would go just in the kind of.
I'm going on November 16th to a conference in Copenhagen.
It's highly contagious, too, isn't it?
I'm sorry?
It's highly contagious.
It is highly contagious, but if you have a good immune system, believe it or not, your body can contain it, and it exists in your lungs, kind of encased. I call it like suspended animation. It's just there unless it's like,
Yeah.
your immune system is triggered
It's
by it.
triggered, yeah.
But it is on the rise now, and part of it is that and that has to do with like what happened with the cutting of funding in the global south, because we live in such a global world right
Yes,
now.
yes.
And so when you have people coming into a country where a disease is rampant in one place, the United States did a great job of really curbing tuberculosis. It was like 8,000 cases a year. Down in the global, but it is the only disease that we can say it's the #1 infectious disease killer in the world. And there's a cure. It just doesn't compute, right?
Yeah.
Somebody else had a question somewhere. Yeah. Hi.
I'd like to know, how did that transition work from when the white nurses were leaving and the black nurses came to Seaview?
They just walked out. The white nurses quit. They left. They went and found other jobs.
But I mean, at the same time, there were enough black nurses at that time to cover all the units?
Oh yeah, they put out a call and they restaffed that hospital. I mean, there was always a nurse shortage at the hospital because the patients, it was always 200 to 300 people over capacity, and it had to do with the same thing that happens now. We talked about this earlier, budget cuts, right? You can only hire 15 nurses, but what about the fact that I have 30 patients, right, per nurse?
Who paid for those people to get there?
It was a municipal hospital. Oh, who paid for the nurses to come up?
They didn't have a lot of money.
They came up by themselves. They got on a bus and they came
of
up
course.
here, and then the city.
Yeah.
Well, they gave them
They
either
did.
housing, and then they made a salary, and a lot of them lived in boarding homes. But the patients, it was a free hospital. It was, and like any municipal hospital, they had to be treated at the hospital.
Yeah.
Did they
Yeah.
get the same pay, the black nurses?
No,
No, of course not.
they were
Yeah.
traditionally paid less. Yeah. So,
Very good.
do we have any more questions? Are we good? Yeah.
So at what point did people wear masks?
So in the early 1930s, there were studies that started to be done on masks, and we're talking about just like gauze over your mouth. And a couple of people were like looking really especially at TB nursing, because they were like, these nurses are really on some of the highly contagious disease in the world. And so how can we mitigate this? Maybe we could put a mask on. And so they started to do these studies, and they found that it did work, except the supervisor at Seaview Hospital, who was this Teutonic white woman who was the daughter of a Confederate medic, kind of wielded her power in these weird, perverse ways. And she didn't want the nurses wearing masks because she didn't believe in them. And she said that masks made them complacent. So only the surgical nurses were allowed to wear masks. That was a big, when I first read that before we had these mask wars, I was like, this is crazy, right? Like who wouldn't put on a mask, right?
Yeah.
That was another thing, like then who wouldn't know, like, a year later. But yes, that was a point of contention for a very long time about masks and what they did and what they didn't do. In the surgical ward, they did wear them.
Thank you very much. One more, please. Oh, fantastic.